Dr. Niki Vincent, the new Gender Equality Commissioner for the state of Victoria. Why is gender equality important in your view?
Well, because gender equality is important because although some people think that we already have it, we absolutely don't. Although men and women are almost equally represented in the workplace, they are not equally represented at every level of decision making and leadership. We know that there is still a massive amount of unconscious bias in relation to women, that impacts them in their workplaces, in their development opportunities, in their pay. We also know that women are concentrated into lower paying roles in lower paying sectors a lot of the time. And they also pay a motherhood penalty when they take time out to care for children, which puts them behind in terms of their superannuation, behind in terms of their pay. And at the end of their working lives, women are the fastest growing group, women of retirement age are the fastest growing group of homeless people and people living in poverty. Why is it important at local government, for local government to have gender equality? Because we absolutely need diversity in decision-making bodies at every level if we're to have gender equality in our community as a whole. Diversity means better decisions get made, and in local government, that's the level of government that's closest to our communities. It's absolutely crucial that local government looks like those communities, and at the moment it doesn't. So it's not just about elected councillors, it's also about the staff within local government. Local government employs about 60,000 Victorians, and almost more than half of that workforce is women, but they are not equally represented in the leadership level. So we have to get more women into leadership in local government at that decision-making and at those decision-making levels.
Local government has such a reach across the community, and it's in a unique position. In many ways, it's unrivaled in terms of its participation in people's lives, in their workplaces, in where they play. And I think, for local government as a level of government closest to the community, it's really important that we play a pivotal role in promoting gender equality. We know that everyone deserves to be treated fairly and with respect. And it's important that as decision-making bodies, we also reflect the diversity that's in the community.
Well, perhaps, Chris, if I could start with why it's important, full stop. Women make up over 50% of our communities, and therefore should be reflected in the makeup of decision-making bodies that are making those important policy and governance-related decisions on behalf of their municipal communities. At the moment, as a result of these elections that we've just gone through, we've seen an increase in the number of women who have been elected to local government in Victoria. We're now at 43.8%, so still not quite at parity. Why is it important right now? Well, I would say it's important all of the time, but here's an opportunity with a new councillor group coming in, commencing a 4-year councillor term, that they not only start to examine the policies and decisions that they make, but they need to apply a gender lens to that. We have, of course, a new Gender Equality Act in Victoria, the first of its kind in Australia, and that has direct implications for local government and also the decision-making processes of councillors.
Hannah Duncan-Jones, can you tell us about how local government Victoria can support gender equality in the state?
Yes, so look, Local Government Victoria has been supporting a number of programs being run by the sector to support women to become candidates in local government. So there has been the Victorian Local Governments Association's Local Women Leading Change program, and there's a study on that that's also about to be published, which looks like it's got some great results with 58 candidates standing in the elections. as a result of that program. So that's really, really fantastic. The VLGA also do Your Community Country Council program, which supports Aboriginal men and women to stand for council. So this is really important in the context of the new Act, and the importance of bringing traditional owners into the local government sphere. And there was the It's Our Time campaign, which was bringing together a whole range of information, whether it was from the VLGA or other organisations, to support women to stand, and that program is going to be going under evaluation. So those programs have been really important. It's going to be important moving forward to the 2024 elections about how we lift that figure again to 50%. So there was also work that we did in the recent years with the staff of the organisations in relation to building a conversation around gender equality in organisations and what they may do to put in place plans which will be good seeding for the Gender Equality Act, which is now coming into effect.
Hannah, can you tell us about some of the key reports that support these moves towards gender equality?
So there was a really good report that Local Government Victoria commissioned, which was the best practice guide for gender equality in local government. And it really is the whole of local government. So it's looking at what councillors and council managers can do to boost gender diversity in their councils and workforces. The Victorian government's strategy, the very important equality strategy, Safe and Strong, sets out the state government framework for really enduring and sustained work on gender equality, including targets for local government. And the Victorian Auditor General has just recently finished some work on sexual harassment in local government, and that inquiry will inform all of the work that councils will do in relation to gender issues in their council, whether it's workforce plans, whether it's how they commit to ensuring that they're a gender-safe workplace. All of those things, really, really important work coming through in relation to that. And of course, sexual harassment is strengthened in the Local Government Act as being a very specific matter that needs to be dealt with if it is there are breaches of that in relation to councillor behaviour.
Hannah Duncan-Jones, as you know, we've got a new piece of legislation for local government, a new Gender Equality Act. How does this legislation align?
So look, it's been great. Both pieces of legislation passed in 2020. We worked very closely to make sure that they were in alignment and that we were going to achieve the best outcome for local government through both of the acts. So they complement each other and they introduce a wide range of measures. So councils must prepare workforce plans that measure gender equality, diversity and inclusiveness in their workplace. Councillors will have access to paid parental leave and reimbursements for care expenses. Action on sexual harassment and other forms of councillor misconduct is again really prominent there in relation to codes of conduct standards and the ways that you can seek outcomes in relation to issues there. And gender equality audits will be taken across local government sector so that you actually can understand this is where we are, where do we want to get to in relation to equality. And it is an integrated approach. And so we're working to make sure that the work is not going to be duplicative, but integrated across both of the acts.
Well, Chris, Victoria's actually been well ahead of it. Its counterparts in other states. We have had a Victorian Women's Charter now for over a decade, which was essentially a statement of intent that committed the local government sector, and particularly those councils who were signatories to the Victorian Women's Charter. I believe we have 76 of 79 councils who are now signatories to that charter, which was basically a commitment to ensuring that the principles of gender equality were included in a council's decision-making, both at the councillor level, but also at an operational level. So it was around inclusion and diversity, in particular the inclusion of the community, but also ensuring that the principles of gender equity were applied across all decision-making processes. So now we're moved forward to 2020. We have, I guess, a legislative compliance framework now that impacts not only the Victorian local government sector, but all statutory and state bureaucracy within Victoria. Again, as I think I indicated earlier, the first of its kind. So I think that there are some great intersections there between the Gender Equality Act and the new Local Government Act, which is, of course, principles based, as is the Gender Equality Act. So we're moving forward. Ideally, from the Victorian Local Governance Association's perspective, we'll see that our local government sector, though, moves beyond that concept of compliance for the sake of compliance, because you have to a culture of embedding the very principles that sit behind gender equality.
So, Dr. Vincent, as the newly appointed Gender Equality Commissioner for Victoria, what is your role going to entail?
My role as Australia's first public sector gender equality commissioner is very exciting. This is Australian first legislation, and this is an Australian first role. So it's an incredible privilege to have been appointed to the role by the Minister for Women, Gabrielle Williams, and I started the role in October this year. The role of Commissioner is to implement and to oversee the implementation of the Gender Equality Act in Victoria, and of course to work with defined entities, the 300 plus defined entities, including all of local government, to actually make this act a reality and to make sure that we are working towards and making measurable and substantial progress towards gender equality in defined entities in Victoria over the next 4 years, and then again over the following 4 years and into the future to come. Hopefully not too long before we actually get there. But of course, local government is a really important part of making gender equality a reality in Victoria.
Dr. Vincent, the Minister for Local Government in Victoria, Sean Lean, has announced a new Gender Equality Advisory Panel, which is part of implementing not just the Local Government Act 2020, but also the new Gender Equality Act. Where will the focus of this panel's work be?
The panel's going to focus on strategies and actions to achieve the 2025 gender parity target in the state government's gender equality strategy, which is called Safe and Strong. It's also going to advise on the progress of priorities and be a platform for discussing gender equity issues relating to the Local Government Act and the Gender Equality Act 2020. It's going to draw members from local government sector peak bodies, from councillors and from council CEOs.
So, Kathryn, what would you advise newly elected members to be thinking about and doing in relation to gender equality?
Chris, I think it's really important that new councillors not only understand their compliance responsibilities in regard to the Act, but they also understand why gender equality is important as a principle. And I would encourage new councillors when they enter the council chamber, whether that be in a virtual sense or face-to-face, and even have a look at the workforce of their own council, that they don't assume that just because there looks to be parity, that in fact it's not something that they have to think about. As I said earlier, women make up over 50% of Victorian communities. So what that means is that councillors also, when they're wearing their decision-making hats, need to have a think about what are the decisions that they're making and how are they impacting upon all sectors of the community. And that means that at times they'll have to apply, well, in fact, they should be applying a gender lens to those decision-making policies all the time, and really understanding why that's important. We've just come out of the back of, or we're still on the back of a global health pandemic where women in particular have been impacted quite significantly by COVID. And similarly, we were also on the back of a bushfire season, 8-9 months ago, where again, women and children are directly impacted. So councils who have a very important role in disaster recovery and planning need to actually be considering that gender element when they're planning for the policies that will support the council in future disaster recovery and planning endeavours.
There's probably two things I'd say to that, Chris. The first one is to be curious, ask questions, listen to the answers, try and understand where your organisation is at on the gender equity journey. I think, there's an opportunity to think about the decisions that come before council and the strategic work you're doing with the community, to make sure you understand how does this play out for different parts of our community, particularly for women and girls in sport might be one example. So it's really important to understand those policy outcomes and how it plays out in the community, and also keep half an eye on some of the new legislative obligations that councils have as well, under not just the Local Government Act, but also the Gender Equality Act.
And Troy, would your advice change if you're speaking to people that work within local government, not councillors?
Definitely. Look, I think for councillors, there's an important point that they're leaders of the organisation as well. And, we understand councils as both elected representatives and officers delivering together in a joined up way. Local government in Victoria employs more than 60,000 people. Those employees that are on the gender equality journey in terms of increasing their understanding and information all play important roles in the community as well, whether it's in community service groups, sporting clubs and the like. So that's really important. The sector has more than 50% of the employees are female. There's a third of senior officers are directors. So we really want to make sure that, that broader gender equity aspects of the community are also replicated inside our organisations and the leadership role that councillors play in that part of their role.